sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face down. The angel of the Lord asked him,
"Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared her."
Balaam said to the angel of the Lord,
"I have sinned. I did not realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now, if you are displeased, I will go back."
The angel of the Lord said to Balaam,
"Go with the men, but speak only what I tell you."
So Balaam went with the princes of Balak.
The end.
That looks like it was kind of directions.
I hope so.
Those are probably seminary students leading churches today. That's 2 goofballs.
It should have been there were no animals harmed in the making of this video.
Yeah. Except for the ones on the grill.
Right. So now I gotta boot up PowerPoint again.
Alright, this is straight up murdering my back. Okay.
Alright, see you, Peter.
You're doing so well.
Down to 9.
I am so hungry right now. You're
That was 9. Okay.
Same here.
So sometimes, excuse me,
Yeah, at least you had everyone on for a few minutes.
that watermelon got me that we were just eating for dinner. I inhaled some of it, and now I've got a tickle this whole time.
Oh, good.
All right, so sometimes there's a fine line between knowing when opposition is God and when we should press on. You know, that takes discernment. And in Numbers 22 is pretty fascinating that the donkey, i.e. the jackass, saw the angel saying stop, and we don't. And that happens to all of us sometimes, doesn't it? So maybe the moral of that story is, don't be a jackass. The next thing the author talks about is Jesus requested noble things. And aren't we all guilty of not asking for noble things? We're like, Lord, can I please get into this college? Lord, this boy or girl is so awesome. Can they be my spouse someday? The author points out these famous people asked for noble things. Abraham said, help me follow you. Moses said, help me free my people. Esther, help me save my people. Solomon, give me wisdom. Right? God said, what do you want? And Solomon said, give me wisdom. Peter said, help me feed your sheep. Isaiah 32:8, but the noble make noble plans, and by noble deeds they stand. So I challenge you guys, have some noble prayers. Ask for some noble things. Next, he formed a team. Now, in the old days, we used to do all of our schoolwork by ourselves. And you couldn't work together or share ideas. You had to do it all yourself. Now in school, some of you that take college classes, teams are real big. And I imagine even in some of the public high school classes and things, teams are big. Because in real life, everything happens with a team. No matter who you are, if you're head of Apple, Steve Jobs, or head of Microsoft, you need a team. So Jesus formed a team. He said, follow me. People followed him. And he knew that he couldn't change the world alone. And we see that, don't we? Here's a big one. He boiled the complex down to the simple. Right? That is a great leadership lesson of Jesus. It says, tickle still. Salvation, theology, tying Old Testament into New Testament, pretty complex things, right? People have PhDs in it. He boiled it down to very simple things. A saying that we can remember is, oftentimes it's good to be bright, to be brief, and to be gone. Mm-hmm. Right? Boil her down. Next, he was visible. When you're a leader, it's important to be visible. When you run a company, it's important not to stay in your office all day. You need to be visible. Back in the old days again, when Apple was coming out, and really Steve Jobs did it throughout his career, and it still happens today, how he'd have those big meetings, right? And they'd videotape it, and he'd talk about the next product. It was very visible. John 1:14 says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Just think how it would be if Jesus wasn't visible during his time on earth. Probably have a different history, wouldn't we? Next, Jesus gave them a vision of something larger than themselves. History repeatedly shows us that people want to believe in something bigger than themselves. That's how you get people energized. Higher purpose is a vital ingredient for the human psyche. In Matthew 4:19 it says, "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." And isn't it interesting that he chose fishermen and then used fish as an illustration over and over? Mm-hmm. That just cracks me up. Jesus served people. So before Christ, what would kings do? They would say, "Serve me," right? It's all about me. Bow to me. Jesus turned that upside down. Jesus washed their feet and served them. So Jesus teaches us in our leadership, again, whether it be in a company, in a small group, in a team at school, the appropriate way to lead is to serve others. So the bullet point reads, traditional leadership generally involves the accumulation and exercise of power by one at the top of the pyramid. By comparison, the servant leader puts the needs of others first and helps people develop and perform as highly as possible. So when we're leaders, it's not to, when we lead a home or whatever, it's not to beat down the subjects, right? It's to help grow them and to serve them. Next, Jesus forgave them. Forgiveness is like oil to an engine. Forgiveness is like gravity, invisible in its power, yet profound in its effects. And Jesus had a true sense of try again. One of the great illustrations I heard, and I just love this. A man in a company makes a mistake, and it costs the company $1 million. And if you don't believe that stuff happens, it does. One example that comes to mind is maybe it was 90s. Somebody did a big market study, and they found that changing the flavor of Coke was the right thing to do. Coca-Cola was going to make a bunch of money. It was called New Coke, and it was a different. You guys, I'm seeing some blank. You guys haven't heard of this? Oh my goodness! You have to Google this.
Okay.
They had focus groups, all kinds of market research, data, and they rolled the product out, and they actually got rid of the old Coke flavor. All they had was called New Coke. All the commercials, marketing, everything, it fell on its face. And they eventually brought back Old Coke, which we still drink today. The guy got fired,
Nice thing.
and he was actually hired back on. That cost Coke tons of money. But there's lots of examples where somebody can make a mistake and cost companies millions of dollars. There was a story, this was in the 2000s, a financial, somebody that like bought and sold stocks, for a big company, started losing money. His portfolio, I guess you'd call it, started losing money. So he started getting more and more aggressive, trying to make up for his mistake before they found out. And he ended up losing like $1 billion or something. No, true story, you can look it up. So back to our story. This guy loses $1 million for his company, and he goes into his boss and he's like, I know you're going to fire me, just do it. I cost you $1 million. And the boss looked up and said, I just invested $1 million in you. I am not going to fire you now. Right? What a way to look at it. Because that guy will never make a mistake again. Why bring in a newbie that might make the same mistake? So Jesus had a true sense to try again. Jesus held his people accountable. Accountability is a key factor in management because it is the cornerstone of empowerment and personal growth. Matthew 18:18 says, Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So he holds us accountable, and it's a great leadership lesson, right? To hold people accountable. He educated them. He went everywhere, teaching, healing, and preaching, right? He was constantly training up his disciples. Since teaching is educating the mind, and preaching is educating the heart, 2/3 of Jesus' work was education. I never looked at it that way. It's one of the reasons I like this book that we're reviewing, is just stuff we've read over and over, right? We've read the gospel so many times. I never looked at it that way. 2/3 of his ministry was teaching. Matthew 4:23, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. So aren't those some fascinating leadership lessons that we can all use in our homes today, in our jobs in the future? We're going to transition and talk about one other thing I wanted to share with you guys this year. We're going to sneak that in, but before I do, let's talk for a minute. Would somebody share of these lessons which one most kind of resonated with you, bounced around in your brain housing group? Yes, Ryan.
Well, I have two because one of them was...
Because you're an overachiever.
Well, one of them was recent, so I feel like that that doesn't kind of count. But I really was impacted by I just invested $1 million into you, so there's your second chance. I just thought that was amazing, especially because you don't see that today.
Right.
The bigger the mistake, the harder you're out.
Right.
Is the motto today, but that's pretty amazing. And then the other one was that pretty much everything, every main thing that happened with a team.
Yep.
Whereas sometimes I'm just content to do everything myself.
Right.
But you really have to have a team. So.
We even see that later in the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
Paul, Timothy, Barnabas, Mark. Right. They were all together. Yeah. Right. A lot, much of the time. They weren't off on their own. And I want to say, even when Jesus sent, I could be wrong, even when Jesus sent off the disciples, they went to different parts of the world.
Oh yeah, no, I think he sent them in twos.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, he did send them in twos.
How insightful. I didn't even pick that up before.
Mm-hmm.
Who else wants to share something? What? Luke.
I guess between the interviewing and networking, but the idea of getting a job from knowing people as opposed to applying.
Right.
Yeah, that was just really interesting to me because it's really true the more you think about it.
Right. Isn't it?
Yeah.
One more. Who wants to share? Trinity, what insightful things do you have? Which ones of these really jumped out at you?
Well, the one that you commented on with you don't know who you truly are until you've gone through trial.
Yeah.
That's very true because, everybody can be content if they have everything.
Yeah.
And everybody can be joyful through that, but it's whenever, you're broken down that you actually find out, what actually is in you, what inspires you, and what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. As Trinity is saying that, the thing that came to my mind was when you read Steve Jobs' biography, the head of Apple, Apple fired him. He created the company, had some huge successes, but he became so obnoxious. It was just that he was so obnoxious. Apple said, "You are out of here, and don't let the door hit you in the backside." And it crushed him. He went on to be part of the start of Pixar.